16 different players on whether you should be starting or sitting them this week in week 4 of fantasy football. We now have 3 weeks of data to go off of. Teams have started to show some of their true colors, and we are going to tell you exactly who you should start and sit to change the outcome of your week 4 matchups. Ty, we're going to start at the top with quarterbacks, work our way all the way down to tight ends, and give a start and sit at each position. So let's start with our quarterback starts of the week. Who is your quarterback start of the week?
It's Caleb Williams, and I'm not sure how I feel about this one, but I think the matchup here is what's selling me on potentially starting Caleb Williams. The Rams are just now a defense that you have to target for your quarterbacks. If you're streaming the position or you're looking for rest of the season, who's playing the Rams twice, right? You're looking at Brock Purdy, etc. The Rams right now are 5th in passing yards allowed. They're 2nd in touchdowns allowed, and they're also giving up a 72% completion percentage. And last week, we saw the most production from Caleb yet this year, 363 yards, 2 touchdowns on 52 attempts. Now, I don't think we're going to see that many attempts again. There's no way that's sustainable for a rookie quarterback. But with no run game here at all for Chicago, they have to rely on Caleb's arm if they want to win games. And the matchup, again, should allow for another good fantasy day through the air for Caleb. So he may be kind of on the fringe of the top 12 quarterbacks you would prefer to start, but I think there's enough there for Caleb to justify a start this week.
Yeah, let's quick run through the list of names you would play him over, because I think there's a lot of good streaming guys this week, but there's also a good list of players like Jordan Love is projected to be back this week. Are you playing Caleb Williams over Jordan Love still, or are you willing to fire up Love in his first game back against the Vikings?
I lean Caleb just because, again, the Minnesota defense has been giving quarterbacks fits all year, and it's the first game off the injury. I'm not sure exactly how healthy he's going to be, so I lean Caleb.
Sure. You've got Geno Smith, who plays the Lions this week. Would you play Caleb or Geno?
I think you could convince me on Geno. I'm going to stick with Caleb since he's my start, but I think you could sway me on Geno.
How about Goff in the same game?
I still would go Caleb. I just want to say this Detroit passing game has been a little underwhelming so far this year. Like, we've gotten good performances from Jameson and Amon-Ra, but like Jared Goff has not really come through like we thought he would.
Right. We're all touting 14 to 17 games indoors this year for Jared Goff. And we're like, oh my gosh, he's going to break fantasy football. That has not quite happened yet. Not that he was going to break fantasy football, but I digress. You mentioned I could convince you on Geno Smith. I'm about to, because he's my quarterback start of the week. Look, these Detroit and Seattle games over the last 3 years have fed families. They have fed generations. Okay. Geno Smith, since he's taken over as Seattle starter, he has scored 23.1 fantasy points last year, finishing as a quarterback 8. And back in 2022, he scored 31.7 while finishing as a quarterback 2 on the week. This game is going to produce fireworks. I am willing to guarantee it, because Seattle is going to have to beat Detroit through the air. That's where Detroit's weakness is. We talk about a run funnel defense. The Lions are a pass funnel defense, all right? They are giving up a crap ton of yardage to wide receivers this year. They have allowed the most yardage to wide receivers in the league this year, and their run defense has been incredibly stingy. One of the best run defenses in the league this year. The crazy stat, though, that really defines my entire argument is the average point total in the last 3 games against these two teams. Remember, we go back to week 17 of 2020, the 2021 season. Technically, it was like in January of 2022. But the point totals, the average point total in the last 3 games between these two teams, 80 total points is the average. I mean, we are talking about 40 points for each of these teams. So I think it is going to have to be an air raid from the Seattle Seahawks if they want to hang with the Detroit Lions in this game. I absolutely love Geno Smith this week. I think he is a borderline top 12 play. I've got him right around my quarterback 14-15 this week.
I think I have him as my quarterback 17, and I debated putting him higher just because of your argument exactly. Like this Seattle Detroit matchup has again fed generations of fantasy football players over the last 2 years. I think the hope that you would have, I should say, my one concern is that because Detroit is playing such a different style of offense this year, where it's very much possession based and on the ground, that if Seattle can't stop the run, we're not going to see a whole lot of Geno, right? And it's not like Seattle has been horrible against the run this year, but they are in the top half of rushing yards allowed this year. So the hope is that Seattle can stop Detroit's rushing game and that it becomes then a duel between the quarterbacks. And if that happens, I think Geno can absolutely feast.
I mean, we also saw in previous years, like Ken Walker put up 2 scores in a previous year. You saw Jamal Williams find the end zone back in 2021 when he was still with the Detroit Lions. I mean, the running backs have had decent days in these games, but I think you are right where Seattle's run defense just is not the same as it used to be. And there's a reality that, again, Dan Campbell, well, we came out and smashed the Cardinals last week, just as I predicted. You know, they came out and played smash mouth football, drove them into the ground in the run game. You know, there's a real chance they could come out and force that on the Seahawks, though. I would be willing to bet we get another air raid here and watch these two quarterbacks go at it again. Let's move on to the quarterback sits of the week, though. Ty, who is your quarterback sit of the week?
It pains me to say this guy,
Yeah, this one
but
pains me too.
it's Anthony Richardson. You can't trust him right now. There is absolutely nothing that he has done over the last 2 weeks to give you any confidence of keeping him in your starting lineup. Now, is it pretty ballsy of me to call him a sit? Absolutely, because this could be the week where he has 3 rushing touchdowns and 2 passing touchdowns, right? Like that's the upside of Anthony Richardson, but with the lack of rushing production over the last 2 weeks and the horrific passing play of Richardson as well, going against the Pittsburgh Steelers, I'm absolutely looking elsewhere. And just to tell you how bad of a matchup it is for Richardson this week, Pittsburgh so far allowing the fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks this year, the 6th fewest passing yards, the 4th fewest completions, and they're tied for 3rd in interceptions. It's a quarterback's nightmare to go against Pittsburgh this year. I'm looking elsewhere. And just to give you an example of how much I'm looking elsewhere this week, in a league where I have Malik Neighbors going up against Dallas, I'm starting Daniel Jones over Richardson, partially because of the Malik Neighbors aspect. I'm not doing a 1-for-1. That's how panicked I am about Richardson going up against Pittsburgh this week.
You're overreacting. I'll tell you that right now. I don't disagree that Anthony Richardson is a sit. That Daniel Jones over Anthony Richardson is a complete overreaction, though, because so far the Steelers this year, they have played Kirk Cousins in his first game back from his Achilles, which didn't go well. This week 2, they played your boy Bo Nix. All right, not exactly stiff competition. And then in week 3, they played Justin Herbert and the Chargers, who exclusively run the football, and Justin Herbert even left that game early. So there's something to be said about they haven't faced stiff competition. That being said, I do think Anthony Richardson he's not in for a bounce back week. I'll leave it at that. I still have him as a top 10 option this week because you're right. I'm leaving him there because of the potential that he actually scores the 2 rushing touchdowns instead of Jonathan Taylor this week, or he even gets 1 to fall his way. The Steelers defense is good. Do not get me wrong. I'm not willing to go that far with Anthony Richardson, though. As much as I love, no, I can't even say love. As much as I understand why Daniel Jones is intriguing this week, I think him over Anthony Richardson is. I'm just gonna say I think it's a slight overreaction.
That's fine. I think just the Malik Neighbors aspect of it is what makes it's because I think they could have very similar weeks in terms of fantasy production at the, not going to look at stat lines, just looking at the point total. I mean, the other part of this too is just that Daniel Jones over the last 2 weeks has gone for 18.3 and 19.4. Daniel Jones has been doing pretty well lately. Maybe I'm taking, or I'm trusting too much in Daniel Jones to continue the streak that he's on, but I again, I just have borderline zero confidence in Richardson.
I mean, I'm fine with that being a bold prediction of the week. Daniel Jones outscores Anthony Richardson. I'm perfectly good with that. I mean, I said that I did a video for Fantasy Pros that probably actually just came out today as well, where I said Anthony Richardson, my bold prediction was that he finishes outside of the top 20 quarterbacks again this week for the third straight week. So, like, there is a world where I think Anthony Richardson disappoints. So, I don't disagree with you that he could absolutely disappoint this week. I mean, your rankings say, he's outside of your top 12 quarterback. So, yeah, he would be a sit for you in 12-man leagues this week. My quarterback sit of the week is Aaron Rodgers, the New York Jets. I just kind of keep falling back on, like, cool, he tore up a really bad New England Patriots defense. I know. Look, I know Gonzalez has been phenomenal this year. He put the clamps on Wilson, but Garrett Wilson still scored a touchdown last week, still salvaged his day. But really, it was on the back of a career freaking day for Tyler Conklin. I'm still not salty about that. I mean, this man, what do you have? 4 catches of 18 plus yards in that game? Like, what in the world? Where did that come from? But look, prior to that game, though, Aaron Rodgers only had 15 fantasy points in week 2, 9.5 in week 1. So now he gets the Denver Broncos, who they've only given up 12.8 fantasy points per game to quarterbacks this year. Again, I understand the competition for the Broncos hasn't been exactly stiff when you get Geno Smith and Justin Fields in 2 of your first 3 weeks. But, this Denver defense in the secondary has looked solid. Pat Surtain has put the clamps on top wide receivers. And so when their weakness is still in the run game, or I should say when they are weaker in their run game still, why would you not beat them with Breece Hall and Braylon Allen? This 1-2 punch that you've just kind of stumbled upon, that's been working for you. So I'm expecting the Jets to also be playing ahead in this game. I'm thinking Bo Nix has plenty of fits, and there's no need for a big day here from Aaron Rodgers, excuse me. So he is my sit of the week. I'm not really bothering streaming him.
No, and there's something to be said too that Denver could be all of a sudden one of the hotter teams in the league just by how badly they beat Tampa Bay. Like, they made Tampa Bay look like a amateur team. So if that continues, that just adds to the argument of just, man, maybe give it another week on Rodgers.
Before we dive into the running back position, Ty, we got to stop and pause and talk to the 90% of you, okay? There's still 90% of you who are watching our content. Hey, it's down. We're down.
Hey,
I mean, we're hey, progress. Progress is progress, right? Progress is progress. 90% of you still watch our content and haven't subscribed to our channel. So we're going to quick change that. I'm going to have you just move your mouse slightly to the left or right or up or down. I guess I don't know which direction. I was going to assume the right, but hover right over that subscribe button and then give a nice little tap, give a nice little click on there, and turn on those notifications while you're at it as well. We are posting 3 podcasts a week for you all, recapping, previewing fantasy football each and every single week. You'll be alerted when all of our newest videos come out. If you're listening to the audio feed as well, we do have a podcast. So if you don't want to watch a YouTube video, you can click on the link down in the description to get access. Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast from. Let's talk about running backs now, Ty. Who's your running back start of the week?
Zach Moss of the Cincinnati Bengals. Just an updated snap count through 3 weeks of Cincinnati's backfield. Zach Moss has played 131 snaps. Chase Brown has played 45.
That's our special teamer, Chase Brown. Atta baby, Chase Brown. Atta baby.
Just some quick math for you. That's a 75-25 split in that backfield. So
Atta baby, Chase Brown.
Yeah.
Special teamer. Chase Brown, nice little product, but continue.
Oh man. This is a Zach Moss backfield. And this past week, Zach Moss got all the goal line and 2-minute snaps. I think I heard Hayden Wink say that on their YouTube channel. But Zach Moss gets Carolina this week. They're allowing the 12th most fantasy points to running backs over the last 2 weeks, but the 3rd most rushing yards.
Yeah.
So this is a great matchup for Zach Moss, who is dominating snaps in this backfield. And this Cincinnati Carolina game currently has the second highest point total of the week at 48.5. That when I saw that, I was like, Vegas knows something that I don't, because who would have thought that Cincinnati Carolina would be that high of a point total? So will there be opportunities to get into the end zone for Zach Moss? I think so. If they're projecting that many points, Zach Moss has a good chance of getting into the end zone.
Look, last week was such a disappointment for running backs against Carolina because it was Zamir White who's let you down all season, and Alexander Madison, who is playing the most niche of niche roles in that offense of basically a receiving back and then getting goal line work, which is like the most obscure combination of roles you could have. Normally, you're just receiving back or the power back, but all of a sudden, Zamir White is like everything up until the goal line, the early down work up until the goal line, and then it's like Alexander Madison on third downs and strictly goal line work. It's baffling to me. And those two, Alexander Madison scored a touchdown, but still, it was not a great day for the Las Vegas Raiders rush attack. Yeah, I love Zach Moss in this game. If he's going to continue to dominate snaps, since he's going to be in the red zone, it's not like you can't move the ball on the Carolina Panthers. I think the Bengals are easily going to find themselves in scoring position, and Zach Moss could totally stumble into the end zone this week. So big fan of Zach Moss as a running back start this week. My running back start of the week, a little bit more of a bounce back candidate. I fire up Tony Pollard this week. He was a letdown in week 3. He only scored 5.9 fantasy points after starting the first 2 weeks as a running back 12 overall. I was shocked to see that in PPR formats, but this is the perfect bounce back game for him though against the Miami Dolphins, because Miami through the first 3 weeks, they have given up the 5th most fantasy points per game to running backs, the 8th most rushing yards, and 5 rushing touchdowns to the position, which is the second most in the league. They also, in back-to-back weeks now, have given up 25 plus fantasy points to both James Cook and Zach Charbonnet. So look, if Brian Callahan is fed up with Will Levis, because you watch these post-game conferences, it is Brian Callahan. They just coming after Will Levis, man. I mean, if they had a better backup quarterback, I wouldn't have been surprised if Will Levis had been benched already.
Well, they've got Mason Rudolph.
Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. He might be able to play with more rhythm within the offense than Will Levis can, but
man, wild card Mason Rudolph. That's who they've got.
All that to say, look, if you're Brian Callahan, you want to take the ball out of Will Levis's hands, this is the game to do it, okay? This is the game to make sure Tony Pollard gets fed 16, 17, 18 rush attempts and has a nose for the end zone here. So fire up Tony Pollard this week. I love the matchup here with the Miami Dolphins. What about you, Ty?
Yeah, I had Tony Pollard as a start last week, and that came back to bite me, but it really wasn't because of what I had argued wasn't right or anything. The Titans just completely abandoned the run game. They only had 11 total rush attempts last week, and 3 of those came from Will Levis himself. Like, they just completely abandoned it. So, to your point too, like in a game where you're going to have your wide receivers going up against a secondary of Jalen Ramsey, Javon Holland, Kendall Fuller, you really want Will Levis to embarrass himself 4 weeks in a row. It's probably going to be best to just kind of let Tony Pollard cook in this one. So I like Tony P as a start again this week.
Let's talk about running back sits then. Let's get a little bit pessimistic here. Who's your running back sit of the week?
It's Carson Steele. Not many. I feel like the top 24 running backs, right, are pretty solidified as like your starts.
Somewhat.
So this one, I feel like if you're starting Carson Steele, you're doing so out of desperation, which I get. It's me right now in one of my leagues, but Kareem Hunt was just signed to the active roster on Wednesday. So part of this is just needing to see what the backfield will be like now. But if Carson Steele gets a similar roll to what we saw in week 3, right? Where he got 17 carries and he had 2 targets, I believe. If he doesn't score, like Carson Steele isn't providing you much, right? So I'm banking on that happening again, where he's not going to find the end zone, and there's the risk of him seeing a decreased role. Yes, Mo agrees with me on this one.
Mo agrees in the background.
He agrees. And he gets the Chargers, who are allowing the 12th fewest.
He's fine.
Okay. I was going to say, the Chargers are allowing the 12th fewest fantasy points to running backs on the year, but they're also allowing the second highest receptions to running backs. So this could be a game that Samaje Perine actually kind of gets more involved in if Kansas City wants to take advantage of that. So I would say, again, you're more than likely not starting Carson Steele, but if you are, even though you're in desperation mode, you may want to pivot this week.
Yeah, I just wait for a better matchup. That's really what it is. I would wait for a juicy matchup. Like when you're looking at like the rate, if they draw the Raiders, right? When they get the Raiders, that's a matchup I would look to start Carson Wentz. If they play I don't remember if the Chiefs play the Dolphins this year, but like wait until you get one of these defenses that is sacrificing top 10 numbers to the position. Then I think you can fire up with Carson Steele. But even if it's a middle of the pack, bottom of the pack matchup, I'm not too interested in firing up Carson Steele. So I'm with you there. My running back sits of the week. I'm really curious if Ken Walker plays in week 4. There's rumors around him potentially coming back this week. I feel like this isn't the matchup you want to bring him back in, though. Like, I get you want all the firepower you can to beat Detroit, but again, with how stingy their run defense is this year, this isn't exactly the game I would want to try and get Ken Walker back on track. So I'm probably going to sit both him and Zach Charbonnet this week if they both play. And if it's just Zach Charbonnet this week, I have no interest in Zach Charbonnet then. Because Detroit, they are only giving up 8.8 fantasy points per game to running backs this year and only 138 rushing yards total on the season. Mathematically, we are talking about just over 40 yards per game rushing to running backs. I mean, they have been lights out in that category. And like I said with Geno, I expect this game to be an air raid from the Seahawks. Like, I really think we're going to see Ryan Grubb put to the test here. So, again, with how solid Detroit has been against the run, I don't want much to do with Sharps if he is the lead back this week. And if Ken Walker is back, I don't know if it's a guarantee they just shove him the full workload. This might be a 50-50 split between the two, and I'm not too interested in either then if that's going to be the case. If Ken Walker were back, had the full workload to himself, I'd probably still play him, but first game back from an oblique injury that they've been really cautious about, I doesn't strike me that they're just going to go ahead and give him, 70% of the snaps right away once he comes back. So I'm not too interested if I would look elsewhere if I have Ken Walker, but if it is just Zach Charbonnet this week, I'm not interested in playing him.
Yep, I agree with all of it.
We'll go ahead. On that note, we'll take a quick break and we'll be back with wide receiver starts and sits afterwards. Today's podcast episode is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, we love Underdog. It is the easiest place to play best ball formats, and they even have their own form of player props called Pick'em. You can make up to 20 times your money on a single night by correlating props together. 2 picks will triple your money, 3 will 6 times it, 4 will 10 times it, and 5 plays that all hit will multiply your entry by 20. You can even place insurance on your picks too, so if only 4 of your 5 props hit, you still get 10 times your entry. And if you use our code FELLAS when signing up, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100. Alrighty, we are back. We have discussed our quarterback starts and sits, our running back starts and sits. We'll finish up the episode with the pass catchers, starting with the wide receivers. Ty, who is your wide receiver start of the week?
Jackson Smith and Jigba, and we are definitely picking on Seattle this week. Starting okay. Geno, sitting the running back, starting JSN, but it's how could you not? It's the matchup. It's exactly what it is. Detroit is allowing the most fantasy points per game to wide receivers from the slot this year. Hello, JSN lines up in the slot on 85% of his routes. I mean, like, I could just end the argument there. Honestly, with everything we talked about with Geno, with everything we talked about the running game, like, this is absolutely the week to fire up JSN. You're already starting DK. You should absolutely have confidence in JSN this week. So I'm just going to keep it short and sweet.
Yeah, I mean, Cooper Kupp, week 1, 32 fantasy points. Chris Godwin, week 2, 24.7 fantasy points. Now, last week it was Greg Dortch, who lined up in the slot 63% of the time, I believe it was. And obviously, when Greg Dortch is your starting slot wide receiver, you're not too worried about it. But then we saw Marvin Harrison Jr. still have a very nice week. So yeah, my bold again, I included JSN in my bold predictions over on Fantasy Pros this week. My bold prediction was that JSN goes off for 25 plus this week. I think this is the matchup that we see him get back on track. We could see him get peppered with another 10 plus targets. And if he finds the end zone, that's the cherry on top then. So yeah, I'm a big fan of JSN this week. I think this is absolutely the matchup. You fire him up to see him bounce back after his dud against the Miami Dolphins last week, where Zach Charbonnet just had a field day. I'm going to go ahead. You can fire up DJ Moore this week. Frankly, if you're not targeting the Commanders or Lions secondary, you can go ahead and just target the Rams secondary this year. I mean, again, you talked about Caleb Williams, Ty. This Rams defense has been unfortunately pathetic. They've allowed the third most fantasy points per game to wide receivers. They've also allowed a wide receiver to score 19 plus fantasy points in each game this year. Now, here's why I'm sticking with DJ Moore and not going with Aroma Dunze. May I remind you, the Chicago Bears offensive coordinator is Shane Waldron. And we have serious questions on if he knows how to run a competent feels. Okay, you and I, competent NFL offense. You and I both, that was my first thought. I go, that feels a little bit harsh, but you said it, so I'm going to say it. You said it. A competent offense in the NFL. And so if the Bears can't run the football, even against a bad Rams defensive front, like Caleb is going to have to continue tossing the rock 35, 45 times a game. So we've had a big Rome week. I'm okay if you want to play Rome this week, but I think DJ Moore is still going to be the alpha here. I think this is the week we see him bounce back and give us a potential 20 plus point week.
Yeah, Keenan Allen is back in a limited fashion in practice. So to me, that has more to do with Roma Dunze than it does with anything for DJ Moore. So yeah, love DJ Moore this week.
I would 100% agree with that sentiment around Keenan Allen. Let's move on to the sits here, Ty. Who's your wide receiver sit of the week? I almost said quarterback Scully. We talked about them a while ago. Who's your wide receiver sit of the week?
It's Calvin Ridley. Part of this is kind of the argument that you made for Tony Pollard as a start for running backs, but for Calvin Ridley, like, do you really want to trust Will Levis?
Yeah.
Especially when the Titans themselves don't really seem to trust Will Levis. So why should you? Miami is giving up the 7th fewest receptions to wide receivers all year. And as I mentioned as well, in that Miami secondary, you get Javon Holland, Jalen Ramsey, Kendall Fuller. Ridley's going to get one of them all game long. It's just not a great matchup. And again, what has he done to give you any confidence to keep him in your lineup? He had 3 receptions in week 1. He had 1 reception in week 3, and he had a great week 2 because he scored on an end around and he caught a fluky touchdown where he had to dive, almost catch it off the ground because there are 2 Jets players right in front of him. So Levis throws it into double coverage. I digress.
Bad idea.
Right, bad idea. Plus, we saw a little bit of a D-Hop re-emergence last week. He had 6 catches, 7 targets, 73 yards, and a touchdown. Now, that was just on 46% of snaps, but whoa. that came out of nowhere. So there's just nothing happening with this Tennessee passing game that gives me any kind of hope to keep them in my lineups moving forward.
Again, I just think you can run all over the Miami Dolphins. I just don't think they're going to need to toss the rock. If you're Ryan Callahan, just don't let Will Levis make mistakes. Don't let Will Levis lose you this game. That's going to be the biggest thing. And I'm going to stick in this. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Levis will still find a way to screw something up, but
Oh, are we going to have like a fourth week in a row of a Will Levis meme? Or like week 1, it's like hands on his head. Week 2, we got him going full Superman. I feel like there was one last week, and I can't think of it off the top of my head.
Oh, it was him getting smoked.
That's what it was. You're right. That's what it was. If we get 4 straight weeks of Will Levis doing that, I mean, that's bad news bears for the Tennessee Titans. No, I'm with you. I'm okay if you want to go ahead and sit Calvin Ridley this week, and I'm going to stick in this game. I think this one feels scary. I think you can sit Jaylen Waddle this week, and I hate saying that because big Jaylen Waddle guy here to start the season. One of my favorite players to take in drafts, but we can keep this pretty simple. It's going to be Skylar Thompson or Tim Boyle at quarterback. Like, capiche?
Kaposh.
The matchup with Tennessee isn't great either, though. I mean, third fewest fantasy points per game to wide receivers this year. Waddle's a fringe flex conversation. That's where we're at. Once we know if/when Tua is back, then we can start talking about Waddle again. But yeah, this isn't a matchup I exactly want to play Jaylen Waddle in. And I'm sorry, Skylar Thompson and golly, I can't believe we're talking about Tim Boyle in 2024, man. I'm still like trying to process that I'm saying Tim Boyle's name in the year 2024.
I know I know why Cam is allegedly sick and isn't on this episode. Because he's got Jaylen Waddle as a top 30 wide receiver this week. That's no bueno.
No bueno. I mean, yeah. There's the camera noise. There it is. There it is. All right, Ty. Let's move it on to the tight ends here. Before we do, though, you can ask all your start-sit questions over in our Discord. We got a community over there. I believe we're over. Are we sitting right around 2,000 strong over there? Where I believe we're just shy. I want to say like 1,800 is probably the right number, but we got a community over there that is ready to help you tackle your fantasy football leagues. We pop in every once in a while, do some AMAs, answer some of your questions as well. But if you have a start-sit question, a trade question, a waiver wire question, anything of the sorts, head on over to our Discord down in the description of the audio podcast or YouTube video you are listening to right now. You can ask your start-sit questions over there to get some additional feedback. Tight ends, Ty. Let's bring it home. Who's your tight end start of the week?
It's Tyler Conklin.
Oh,
I feel great about it. Go ahead and play the sound.
3, the career day. He's chasing it. No, I'm not going to play the sound. That's not worthy of the Cameron sound. Unless, go ahead. You can explain why you want to play Tyler Conklin this week after he, just decided to literally bust half of my parlays last week.
Yeah, almost everybody's probably. Garrett Wilson will be dealing with Pat Surtain all game long.
Yeah.
Pat Surtain literally just shadowed Mike Evans on all but 10 snaps in week 3. So why would he not shadow Garrett Wilson like he has been doing all year so far? I just think it could be a very similar game script for Tyler Conklin to what we saw in week 3. And Denver's allowing the 12th most receptions to tight ends. So it's there. It's there. I don't feel great about it, but it's there. And at this point, with how bare the tight end position is, you may just have to kind of like grab and hold on to any kind of like glimmer of hope in terms of just past weeks of production. You could take the shot on Conklin this week.
I'm not even going to speak on Tyler Conklin. I'm removing myself. From
we should just move on.
And we can move on because I can't hold a place to talk about Tyler Conklin when I said to take his lower on longest reception of 12.5 yards last week. And then he goes ahead and
he averages 18.
I couldn't believe that. That just blew my mind. Dallas Goedert. Fire up Dallas Goedert this week. Again, this is very simple. No A.J. Brown or Devonta Smith, most likely. I'm going to be shocked if Devonta Smith plays this week, but if it's anything like we saw last season, if you're in concussion protocol, you're going to be out for at least a week, even if it's just precautionary. So,
and his was Devontae was scary.
That was like, he might have actually been unconscious on the field at that point. So yeah, you're going to be without Devonta Smith most likely. It sounds like you may still be without AJ Brown. So Dallas Goedert and Saquon Barkley against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That's all you got. So he is the number one option in Philly, and that's about all I got to say.
Dallas Goedert to the moon.
I look, hey, you know what? He was sit of the week 2 weeks ago, crushed it. Start of the week now, 0 to hero. Had a baby, Dallas Goedert. Way to go. Tight end sits of the week, Ty. Want to just vomit and sign off?
We probably should, but I don't think we're doing a service to the people.
I don't think we're doing a service by naming a bunch of guys that you're probably just streaming at this point. Yours is at least
honestly. Here's what
a mention.
Here's what the people should do. Join our Discord page. Go to the general chat channel and just type some random tight ends, and we will literally just yes, no, because that's seriously how it is. You can name 80% of tight ends, and we're going to be like, no, don't start them. I feel like I just need to say something about Cole Kmet. We called Caleb a start. We called DJ Moore a start. Cole Kmet's a sit. Okay. This hinges on Keenan Allen not playing. It sounds like he will be because he was limited in practice on Wednesday. And while the Bears have been getting Cole Kmet more involved in the receiving game in recent weeks, is that really because they want to get him involved in the offense, or is it just because Keenan Allen was out? I just think it's too much of a coincidence that because Keenan Allen was out, Cole Kmet was seeing an uptick in usage. So just a reminder that when all top 3 wide receivers for Chicago were healthy in week 1, Cole Kmet saw 1 target. So yeah, that's a Cam noise stat. That is. Thank you. Yeah. Don't get fooled by what we saw last week, where I know I just said that like any glimmer of hope you should really kind of take a chance on with Tyler Conklin. The Cole Kmet is the exception here. If all 3 receivers are playing, he's not startable.
Not salty after I said to cut him over on Fantasy Pros. You know, he pops off for 25 plus last week.
Convenient.
It's chill. Convenient. I mean, I said to cut him after week 1. Said to do it after week 2 again because people had it, and then the people were right for week 3. So yeah, I do agree. I think that does have something to do with Keenan Allen being out though too. So we've seen a little bit of a correction to maybe the mean of Arthur Smith, because in week 1 Gerald Everett was out on the field a ton compared to Cole Kmet. We saw that recorrect itself, but yeah, if Keenan Allen is on the field, I'm good with waiting to see on Cole Kmet. Hunter Henry, if you're considering playing him this week, don't. Jacoby Brissett still sucks. Isn't good. Excuse me. I'll be nice. Still hasn't thrown for more than. He's better than us. Still hasn't thrown for more than 150 passing yards this year. 49ers have allowed only 3.3 fantasy points per game to tight ends this year. You just got better options on the waiver wire. I'm gonna leave it at that. And case closed. Don't play Hunter Henry.
I'd rather play Mark Andrews than Hunter Henry. What a sentence. What a sentence. That feels
the man who gave you a goose egg last week.
Last year, that sentence is a no-brainer, and now we're in 2024, and people are actually going to consider it.
Yeah, play Mark Andrews. I can't believe we have to still say play Mark Andrews as if it's a question. Look, if you haven't subscribed already, make sure you do that, people. We appreciate your support. We've been growing very, very quickly over here on the channel. I just looked, I want to say like nearly 600 subscribers here over the last 3 weeks, which is incredible. So thanks for your support over there. We really do appreciate it. We're going to continue to bring you content all off season long. We've got the panic meter that's still coming out eventually. That's going to kind of shift to a trending or ending as we get deeper into the season and identify who is trending upward based on matchups, who is trending downward based on performance, snaps, whatever it may be. We're going to transition to that. We'll always have a trade episode for you until your trade deadlines have hit in your league, and we will always have this episode for you, the make or break, the 16 to 24 players who will change your fantasy outcome on the given week. You can follow us on the socials. I am at Lucas Wenzel. If you're watching over on YouTube, it is like right here. Right? No, other side, because my camera's going to flip.
Other side. Yep.
My camera's going to flip. Yep. golly, Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter right here at Lucas Wenzel, Tyler_Plath for Tyler. You can follow the fellow socials as well. FFL is on Twitter. The FFL is on Instagram, Fantasy Football Fellas, Facebook, and TikTok. We'll see you all on Sunday. We're going live. I guess we haven't decided who's going live. If it's going to be you, me, or Cam. The team missed this.
We'll be live.
We'll be live either way. Make sure to tune in, turn on those notifications, and subscribe so you know when we're going live. See you all next time. Deuces.